Good morning. Hope my hair's good enough for you. Geez, I don't know what I would do if I couldn't meet with you. The expectations of your social norms and morals. What would I ever do if I couldn't meet those expectations? But this video is a long overdue video about the border, and not just the border of Mexico with the United States, but the border of Mexico with Guatemala, the border of Guatemala with El Salvador, the border of El Salvador with Honduras, and Honduras with Nicaragua, and Nicaragua with Costa Rica. I've been through all of those borders this year. Well, I haven't been through the United States-Mexican border, but all the other borders I passed through this year, multiple times actually, in some of the border cases. And the Mexican-Guatemalan border in particular, I crossed 3 times. So what's wrong with the border? Why the big deal with the Mexican border with the United States? You know, if Mexico is really a good friend of the United States, which it is, because if it wasn't, there wouldn't be Coca-Cola and Walmart and Home Depot and all these other things here, and Humira and AbbVie, whatever, all this corporate bullcrap on both sides of the border, which brings in the question why the border even exists, really. Because we have 13 million Mexicans in the United States, and we have 13 million U.S. citizens here in Mexico, and we have Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, and all the major corporations everywhere across the border, every which way. So what real purpose does the border serve at this point in this modern world? None, except for that the government gets to make money on taxes, and the mafia gets to make money on quotas. Because either way you cross the border, illegally or legally, you're going to pay somebody. So let's just leave the Mexican-U.S. border alone for a minute. I just did a trip this year, about a month ago, I flew from Mexico to Costa Rica, and I went by land from Costa Rica to Nicaragua, and I stayed in Nicaragua for about a month to examine the situation in Nicaragua, which is a dire situation created by bankers and secret police of foreign governments. And then I went from Nicaragua. I actually in Nicaragua saw a rebel army training to overthrow the Ortega government. I saw around 20,000 people that had taken over a farmer's land who wasn't able to grow food there anymore. About 20,000 people in little huts all across about 300 acres of land in northern Nicaragua, getting ready for a war. When I saw that, I said, I got to get out of Nicaragua. I'll just go to the border of Honduras. When I got to the Nicaraguan-Honduras border, lo and behold, I paid $3 to cross the border, but no one checked my bags, not even once. I didn't have a single person ask me to, pat me down or nothing. I could have brought kilos and kilos of coke across the border, no problem. In fact, the Costa Rica-Nicaragua border was the only border that had a serious checkpoint. And there's good reason for that at that particular border. The Nicaraguan military is actually there, and they're actually actively inspecting people's luggage. But the Nicaraguan-Honduran border, no checkpoint really, just stamping some passports and taking some money. Then, as I traveled through Honduras, this was really crazy. I was the only white guy on a bus, and normally if you go through a military checkpoint, everybody's IDs have to be checked. Everybody, without fail. So we get to a military checkpoint in Honduras as we're going on our way to El Salvador, and we get stopped, and the soldiers say for everybody to give them their IDs, but I don't give them my ID. I keep my ID. All of a sudden, everybody's getting inspected except for me. And I haven't given them my ID. So they don't even have a reference point for me, but they're looking at me and they know that I'm a foreigner. I felt like what a point in time in my life where I was discriminated against by racism because they knew I was this white guy. They said, we don't need to check his passport, but we'll check all these other people's IDs because they might be killers or drug dealers or gang members. It's Honduras, right? So everybody gets checked except me. And they don't even say hi to me. They don't even look at me practically, except for in the beginning. And then we leave. So that bus took me to the border of Honduras and El Salvador. And really, I don't recommend going to El Salvador right now. It is extremely dangerous. And even the police and the government's controlled by the mafia. Completely, 100%, I'm convinced. I'm lucky to have even gotten through El Salvador in one day. Okay, basically, and alive. And without being robbed or anything. And if I hadn't spoken Spanish, I think I probably would have had a different situation happen to me. So, notwithstanding, at the Honduran El Salvadorian border, once again, nobody checked my backpack. Nobody checked a damn thing about me. They just stamped my passport, took some money, and said, "You have 90 days in Central America. Welcome." Oh, cool. Yeah, good. But I could have brought kilos and kilos of coke again through 2 different borders now. So I get to the border at El Salvador in Guatemala. Holy macaroni. Got my passport stamped. I don't think I even paid. I didn't pay for that one. And I didn't pay to enter El Salvador either. And they didn't check my bags. Not once. Not a minute. Not at all. Didn't pat me down. Didn't ask me nothing. Welcome to Guatemala. At that point, it was like 10 at night in Guatemala at that border. And so I stayed at that border in a really nasty hotel. It's okay. Most border hotels are nasty. But the people there were nice. Actually, it wasn't that bad of a hotel. I met some people who told me about the local money changers. That's an interesting story. And the local money changers are the shit at that border. Everybody else has got no job, really. So, but the money changers and I hung out that night, had a couple beers, and they told me a couple things that were pretty interesting. So then, I went from that border, I stayed in Guatemala like 4 days, 5 days in Antigua. You can see that other video, a brief video. And I got to this place called La Mesilla. Now here's where this story gets really interesting, okay? Because there's 3 parts to the Mexican-Guatemala border, really. Well, there's more, but there's 3 parts that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about Ciudad Tucumán. I'm going to talk about Ciudad Talismán. And I'm going to talk about Ciudad La Mesilla. Now, earlier this year, I happened to go down towards Tapachula to cross the border to renew my visa. And when I crossed the border in Talismán, I stayed a night in Guatemala, and I came back, and I had my visa stamped, and I had to pay 540 pesos, because that supposedly is the amount that you need to pay to renew, to come into the country by land and pay for a visa, a tourist visa. Okay, so I paid it, did my stuff, hung out, whatever. But really, at that border, again, nobody checked my backpack. Nobody. I paid for my tourist visa, but nobody checked me out at all. And I crossed that border.